Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the red rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low magazine? Because 4Low magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On today's episodes of Conversations with Big Rich, we have none other than Josh Wilson. Josh Wilson was an East Coast spotter for Rusty Bray back in the OG days of rock crawling. Together, both Josh and Rusty ran a number of different series. We'll talk about all those, plus our time in Baja. Okay, Josh, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Jump right in. Where did you grow up, and what kind of influences did you have that get you into off-road?
Yeah, first off, Big, I just want to say thanks for having me on here. It's definitely an honor, especially with the list of other people you've interviewed and the places they've been and the things they've done. So I'm honored just to be on here to start out. But for me, just a small town country boy, grew up in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. You know, growing up on the farm, working tobacco, ATVs, go-karts, that kind of thing was really my first introduction to anything off-road related. And then, you know, as I got older, as I got my driver's license, obviously, I think like any young kid, 16, 18 years old, you know, you get drawn to the four-wheel drive crowd, especially growing up in rural Kentucky. And I think what really turned it for me was actually my cousin randomly got a Jeep. It was a brand new 98 Wrangler that had fallen off the back of a railroad car. And he got it for stupid cheap. He rebuilt it, you know, and it really wasn't damaged that bad. It was, you know, flares and, you know, windshield frame and cage. And so he rebuilt it, and then he started building it, and he started wheeling it. And that really got my blood boiling to get involved into that community. My parents had to deal with me from, you know, the day I started school, or whenever I asked about it, I guess, that, you know, hey, if you can graduate high school with, you know, a straight A's, good attendance, some kind of scholarship going into college, you know, we'll buy you a vehicle, whatever vehicle you want. So that day came. I didn't really get through high school. Got a academic scholarship to University of Kentucky. You know, so my parents brought it up and said, all right, what do you want? I said, well, look, here's this ad. It's an 87 Jeep TJ7. It was perfect. You know, it's been redone completely, new paint, like a small block 350 in it. You know, just an ideal redneck Jeep for what I wanted at the time, right? Of course, my mom wouldn't have anything to do with that, so they bought me a 99 TJ because, you know, I wasn't going to be commuting back and forth to college, so I probably did need something more dependable, something with a hard top that I could actually lock and park for a week or so at a time, you know, in the lots at school and things like that. So that's what I ended up getting. And of course, yeah, you went mudding, you went, you know, splashing through, you know, rivers and creeks and stuff like that. And what I'm leading up to is actually it was a rainy morning. I was driving into school that morning. A truck in front of me stopped, and when he stopped, I hit my brakes. Of course, you know, the Jeeps aren't exactly known to stop on a dime, right? The Jeep slid, I hit the back of the truck, demolished my fenders, or creased my front fenders, destroyed my bumper. I went off the road, slid through the mud, through mud and grass all over the top of my Jeep, and there I was, right? So police came, they did the insurance report. I had to go to school. I parked my Jeep. Well, it just so happened that there was a group of guys about 3 years older than me who'd been wheeling for a while. And they saw my Jeep in the parking lot, you know, muddy, covered in just mud and grass, and, you know, all front end all beat up. They left the card on my windshield. and it was for the University of Kentucky Jeepers Coalition. Just a small club they were starting. That's how I met Buddy Sampson, who's actually the first guy that I started competing with. So we were with those guys, and in that winter, the Jeep got lifted, went to like 33s, kept it open. I was a college kid. I couldn't afford to do much more than that. And so we'd wheel, do the weekend trips to local areas here that, we could go and camp overnight and stuff. And, of course, right down the road from us is Jellico, Tennessee. It's about 2 hours away. And this is when E-Rock was first kicking off. So in the summers, like the last weekend from April through October, whatever those dates were, we all pile up and drive down and watch the E-Rock competition. And so that led into, we should do this. We looked up the entry fees, and I forget what they were at the time, a couple $100, maybe, really cheap entry fees. We just swapped Wagoneer 44s into his Jeep. And this Jeep later became known as the Superman Jeep. Anybody who looked at E-Rock in those early days will remember it, because it was just a hunk of junk that we threw together. Stock transfer case, stock everything. 331 gears, and the stock Data 44s out of a Wagoneer. So anyway, he's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, well, I'll tell you what. I said, I'll pay the entry fee if you're serious, and we'll use your Jeep if you're serious. He's like, absolutely, let's do it. And he's like, what do we need to do to it? I'm like, well, we need a cage. We probably lighted up some. So I caught him gone. He and his now wife, they were just dating at the time, Brooke. They went somewhere for a weekend trip to get away. And he'd left the Jeep at the shop, which the shop we're using at the time was Kentucky Off-Road, who was owned by Rusty Bray. So you can see, I know you already know that one.
Right.
So he left the Jeep there and left me in charge of, getting ready for this competition. And I don't know if you remember Daryl Motley or not.
Oh, yeah.
But Daryl was big into the E-Rock and then the U-Rock, and helped build that first man-made course out in Salt Lake City. Anyway, he's local here as well, into this area. So he stopped by the shop and said, "You got to lighten it up. You got to lighten it up. You got to get behind the center of gravity. You got to get as wide as you can. You need to cut the body off." So we got the sawzall out and we cut the back of the tub off. And this was like a still pretty pristine 1992 Jeep Wrangler YJ 4.0, a high output automatic. I mean, it was still a very nice, small crawler Jeep. We just chopped it right in half and took a picture of it and sent it to Buddy, who was, with his girlfriend on this trip. And I think his heart sank a little bit, but he warmed up to the idea shortly after. So that's how we get started competing. Our first event was the first event in E-Rock, 2003. So I've been going at it ever since in some form or fashion.
Oh, that's awesome. So your first car was a TJ?
Right. Yeah.
When you were in high school, did you get to drive one of your parents' cars?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, we had a little 93 S10 5-speed two-wheel drive truck, and that's what I beat around in high school. Did
you take automotive repair classes or any shop classes while you were in high school?
So no, I didn't, and I think that's where my story may differ from a lot of people's. So in high school, I was very focused on academics and sports. I played soccer, I wrestled. But on the flip side of that, I was beta club, academic teams, Spanish honor society, class president, all that stuff. And so when I got out of got out of high school, I was going straight into academic scholarship or engineering at University of Kentucky. I did that for 2 years, which is during that time is when I met Buddy and we started this competition thing and all that. And I realized really quickly that I wanted to do something with automotive. So I actually stepped out I walked away from a full ride at UK, which is probably not the smartest move I ever did in my life, but stepped into our local community technical college. They had an automotive program that started every third semester. Unfortunately, when I was starting, we didn't start until the following semester, so I'm like, well, I'll take, machine tool and die. That looks kind of cool, right? So that's what I did. I stepped into these tool and die classes and really fell in love with that trade and ended up moving forward with my career. I got my associate's degree in applied science and all my certificates in machine tool, and that's how I started my career. On the backside of that, though, along with tool and die, there's also fabrication, there's welding, there's sheet metal work. Most of my mechanical aptitude as far as actually working on vehicles came from the shop, working on the Jeeps and all that stuff. We were, at that time, none of us had any money. but we loved it so much that we did everything we could. So any way we could save a dime, save a penny, and keep the Jeeps running. So like a lot of people, we just learned to do it ourselves.
Awesome. Let's talk about that first event out there. You rock at Jellico?
My first event?
Yes.
Yeah, it was still E-Rock at the time.
Oh, E-Rock, okay.
Yeah, it was still E-Rock. So yeah, we showed up. And, at that time, E-Rock was in its prime, really. You had 60 competitors there. They had people with rock crawlers showing up just in case someone canceled. It was quite a sight to see. Anybody who's been to that site since then, I think leftovers of the huge parking areas because they had to just keep bringing dozers and making bigger parking areas and bringing in more fans. So it was a riot. Here we are, two college kids. We showed up. Our tow rig was a V8 Grand Cherokee. That's what we were towing with. I brought my uncle's trailer, kids there. We didn't have bead locks. We were on literally super lift, 4-inch sprung under springs with a, shaft reversal kit up front that we made ourselves. Wagoneer Dana 44s with factory 331 gears, factory shafts. We'd actually taken the rear drive shaft out of the Wagoneer we got the axles from. That's what we used for the front drive shaft. So really the only high dollar part on this whole Jeep was it had like a flip yoke eliminator kit on the factory 231. I mean, we were, very, very, very out of our league. But we showed up and we had a blast and we broke every obstacle. We had flat tires and we rolled over and still went home with nothing but smiles on our faces, right? And took it back to the shop and made a few changes. And then we actually ended up finishing in that Jeep as high as 4th place, I think, that year. So that was a pretty good finish considering what we were competing with. But regardless, we got to know everybody. At the time, that was Danny Rohr, Chris May, Drew Goldie may have already been there or came shortly after, Mike Colville, some of those guys that later went on into the Wee Rocks. That's when we all met and we all started competing against each other. So that camaraderie is what kept bringing us back.
Were any of the Jellico Hotel rodeos going on back then?
Oh, yeah. So that's, it was probably a little different theme back then, but it was still just the same Jellico Motel. Anytime you went to Jellico Motel, you knew you were in for a ride, right? I can remember there was one event earlier on, sometime in that first year, I think, where some of the guys decided to bring their little, not the RC rock crawlers, but like the little RC, the Traxxas trucks and stuff, little nitro-powered trucks. So they're running them, racing up and down the parking lot. They're screaming. Of course, everyone's out in the parking lot. It's just a big party, right? We're out there having a good time, and here comes this cop car. And he pulls up, and there's a little local sheriff. He flips his lights on, and we're all like, oh, we're in for it now. And keep in mind, at this time, I'm 19 years old. That's how long ago this was. So he gets out of his car and walks up and kind of adjusts his belt, and he steps up and puts his foot up on the picnic table we're all sitting at and kind of looks around. And a couple of guys were standing there holding their remotes, and one guy was holding his truck in his hand, and he said, I'm going to tell you boys something. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the under this parking lot. I'm going to park my car. You all are going to drag race towards me, and whoever has the fastest car wins. Whoever has the slowest car has to buy everyone else beer the rest of the night. Like, yes, sir. Sure enough, he pulled down at the end of the parking lot, and they would start racing, and would turn into a big drag race all night with those little RC trucks. And he'd call it on his megaphone the times, which lane won. And so we did that all night long. But that just, that was the first. And Jellico everyone learned. When you go to Jellico Motel, you're going to have a good time. Depending on who's there. And you just never knew exactly what it was going to turn into. It just, at some point, it was probably going to involve adult beverages and most likely fireworks. So.
Fireworks, yes.
Yeah.
How many years did you compete with your college buddy?
So we just competed the 1 year. He graduated, actually that spring, he graduated, and he moved away, and so I had to start looking again for, I still wanted to be in the game, right? And so I started looking at weights and related. So actually another buddy of mine, Nick Arlinghouse, stepped in. We went in together and actually bought my first competition rig that I purchased with Nick. We split it. It was Jason Heads the year before, but he had purchased it off of Travis Roark, who had built this as a trail rig when he worked for Moore out in Colorado. So it was just a sprung under, shackle reversed, sprung over, shackle reversed, YJ, stretched, pulls in the rear. A very good, solid trail rig at the time. So Jason Head was moving up to unlimited class. He had stripped that down to basically just the powertrain and the chassis. And I think he wanted like $2,400 for it or something. And I'm like, come on, man, put me on a payment plan. You know, that's like how low we were. It's like, all right, how about I give you like $200 a month for, you know, whatever. And I forget what we worked out, but we worked it out. And so once a month we'd meet at he worked in Lexington right down the street from where I was going to school. So once a month we'd meet at a little local Italian restaurant, and I'd give him some more cash to pay off my debt. So we finally got it going, and that's what we competed in 2004, 2005. It went through a lot of iterations during that time. Got narrowed, you know, went from 44s, we finally put 60s under it, finally put, you know, linked the front, put air shocks on it, you know, just the normal progressive steps you would take when you're building something like that. But, and I don't remember if E-Rock, 2003 may have been the last year for E-Rock. And then 2004, I believe, is when U-Rock bought them out. And I believe that was the first year of We-Rock. Is that correct on the East Coast?
We came out, I think we came out first as Cal Rocks or NARCA, and then our first season of We Rock was actually 2005. Okay,
that could be very true. I do remember though for sure that 2004 was U Rock, and that's when we went to Fog City, Utah, for that man-made course there. And but that was also the first year that two things happened. One, we tried to start getting some sponsorships, and two, we were no longer just competing. The one thing I could say for a low budget team like us was the E-Rock, you know, they had 6 races a year, and 5 of them were in Jellico, Tennessee, 2 hours down the street. So it's so easy for me to just run down there and race and not spend a lot of money. And then when U-Rock and then We Rock came in, that's when the traveling started for all the teams, right? And so that was a new experience for us, a new cost for us, and something we had to figure out how to overcome. And so we started putting together proposal packets, marketing packets for potential sponsors. And I hate to know how many we sent out. But, you know, we did get some hits. That's right when Maxxis Tires was coming on board. WMS, I think it was Walker Machine Shop, was big into it at the time. You know, we had a couple, I can't think of the name of it. We had several sponsors that came in and helped us with parts, gave us some money. Because that was even before, you know, what you look at now as a sponsorship proposals and packets, that was even before really the contingency thing was taken off, right? You know, right. That was still kind of a new thing then. So these sponsors were willing to give you product and money up front. So we did that, got into traveling, rock crawling. Still at this time, you know, we're both still in college. We're borrowing someone's truck, we're borrowing someone's trailer. You know, we're doing everything we can to get this thing to these competitions. You know, working on it in the parking lot of our apartments or our houses. Again, Kentucky Off-Road, you know, Rusty Ray helped us a lot. He ended up closing it down. He's always been into the transmission business, as I've known him. He started focusing more on his transmission shops and closed down the off-road shop. It was just more of a hobby thing for him. And at that time, Colin Wilson picked it up and made big off-road. And so we were big buddies. He was actually my roommate. And so we started working on it there. And anyway, we save a penny and still continue to compete. That was our main thing, right? And so we just kept busting it and doing whatever we could and trying to be competitive and you know, making improvements and trying to get better and on and on and on.
In those first couple of seasons, did you score well enough to get on the top of the podium at all, or were you?
No. I was, like I said, you know, there was a lot of changes. I mean, of course, even today, the technology in the sport is growing so crazy, so rapidly. Yeah. Well, thanks to pioneers like, you know, Jesse Haynes and those guys are out there always constantly trying to make changes, little minute, you know, whatever it is, you know, the new transfer cases, you know, the sway bars, you know, back when in my day it was, hey, these people are putting winches on the rear of their cars now, you know, that was like the new thing back then, right? We're talking back when, hey, the Goodyear MTR is no longer the tire to have because BFG has a tire called Crawl, you know, that long ago. we were running, I was still in the Data 44. I was running 35-inch tires in a 37-inch tire class because I couldn't afford to put axles underneath my car every weekend. But we did get, and I don't remember if it was U-Rock, We-Rock, E-Rock, I don't remember who it was. There were some of those series that at one time, if you finished in the top 10, your entry fee was paid. You didn't have to repay your entry fee for the next event. And that was huge for us when that was happening because we knew if we get in the top 10, it wasn't going to cost us any more money to come back and play again. And so we tried to do that as well. But no, we made it to several shootouts. We did pretty good. There was an event in Tennessee, no, in Indiana. I think it was a U-Rock event. What was the big
Portland.
man-made? Portland, yes. I think that was a U-Rock. It may have been a U-Rock event. Did you do events there?
It was U-Rock.
Okay. There was an event there where we were like in second place, smoking it. And I dropped off of a ledge, and again, I was still running leaf springs up front, and just the way I hit, it caught my front bumper and shoved that frame rail down about 18 inches, shoved my drive shaft through my transfer case, just destroyed my drivetrain. And even after not running the last obstacle or being able to participate in the shootout, I think we still finished top 5. So that was probably one of my better appearances, other than I was good until I wasn't. So.
Until you killed the car.
Yeah, absolutely destroyed it. But that's what made us cut the front of the car off and 4-link it and rebuild it and go to the next step, right?
Right. Yep. So when did you start competing with Rusty?
So 05, at the end of the 05 season, we knew that if we were going to do it, we needed to build a new car. And I think there were some rule changes that year where you no longer had to have any form of a factory chassis. You just had to have 2x4 rectangular tubing. You were still required to run a steering box, I believe. Then whatever the other ones were, I don't remember exactly. But we decided it was time to build a car. And actually, a local builder, Richard Wells from the hobby shop, stepped up. He's like, "Hey, I want to help you guys do this. You cover materials, and I'll build you a car." So that's when we built the blue Liberty buggy. I don't know if you remember it or not. It was blue and orange with the Campbell Liberty front clip and rear fenders and all that. That's when we built it. And
Yep.
So we brought it out in 2006. That was my last year racing because 2007 were some additional rule changes where I think they got away from the requirement on the chassis length got shorter. You no longer had to have a steering box. You no longer had, there was just several different changes, and I got to the point where I just couldn't afford to be competitive anymore. So I sold my car. I sold my car as a down payment on my first house. So it's probably
That's much better investment.
Right. So Rusty had also taken a year off. He competed in 05. He had that Badlands built rear steer moon buggy. And so then he sold it, took 06 off. And then with those new Pro Mod rules, he's like, hey, let's go run Pro Mod. Because at that time, the rumor mill was swirling already that Kenny Bloom was going Pro Mod. Derek West was stepping up to Pro Mod. Pro Mod was going to become a competitive class, like a legit, and it did there for a few years. It was the biggest class out there.
Yes.
So again, he and I were always hanging out, talking, and he's like, well, why don't you spot for me? I'm like, absolutely. And so I always had worked on his cars a lot because I was at his shop a lot anyway. And so it was just a natural fit. So we competed 2007, 2008 in all the We Rocks. And then we also competed in the XRAs during that time frame. That, of course, is what led to KOH, hence the Baja trip for us, hence, that part of the history stuff.
Right. Let's talk about some of the drivers from back then. Did you get to compete against, or were at the events where? Well, let's talk about guys that you competed against. You said Danny Rohr, otherwise known on Sunday mornings or Saturday nights as Randy Dorr. So let's be kind. But what did you think of Randy or what did you think of Danny the first time you met him?
Well, I'll tell you, back then Danny was not much different than we were in that he was close by. He was His drive to Jellico was about an hour, hour and a half more than ours was, but he was still under probably 4 hours to get there. I mean, we just all hit it off immediately. We were, Danny's a little older than me, I believe, but, Danny and his father Chad at the time, myself, Chris May, we all just kind of hit it off, and it was really easy to compete with those guys. At the time, you still had Space Ghost, Mike Smythe back in those days. There's a lot of other big names that I'm just drawing a blank on right now. But, yeah, we just all hit it off. And, it was rock crawling in general has always been, it's gotten more competitive, I think, as the years have gone. But it's nothing like drag racing or dirt track racing, I don't think. It's nothing for you to stand next to the guy and say, man, what are you going to do on this course? He says, I'm going to take out that cone and back through that one. Wish me the best of luck. And, all right, cool. And so we would always kind of share our strategies and talk through them and play devil's advocate. And, since your car has this, it might be better doing this and blah, blah, blah. And, we really tried to help each other. There were several times when there'd be a group of us get together and we'd say, all right, hey, nothing against the sanctioning bodies, but let's all make a gentleman's agreement that we're not going to try that bonus because we don't want to trash our cars and have to be at the next competition 2 weekends from now, and that happened some too. But no, Danny, one of my first memories of Danny, and I got so many memories of Danny. I always seem to end up the last ones around the campfire in the night.
Yeah.
We were at a Jellico competition and out in the parking lot, and Danny had come out. I don't remember what was going on, but he's sitting there talking to me, and then I realized that he's standing there in nothing but his whitey tighties. He's got his leg propped up, and no shirt, no shoes. He's got socks on, and he's shiny whitey tighties, and everyone's giving him a hard time. And I guess his wife had just bought them for him, like for that weekend trip on his way down. But he was proud of them, cleaned his garment of clothes and he brought with him, and he was showing them off. And he ended up skipping through the parking lot with my wife, or my girlfriend at the time. They ended up skipping through the parking lot together, making a lap on a dare, him and his whitey toddy. So, yeah, it's just always good times. Yeah, there's so many stories about Wombat. He's something else. But all those guys, though, it was just the camaraderie was there. If you were broken, if anyone had a part or had something to help you out, or maybe they had some free time before their next run, before their next obstacle, everyone was always helping everybody out. It was nothing for me to pull into the pits when something broke. And before I'm even unbuckled and out of the comp rig, there's 3 guys under my car already working on it. They've already heard what the problem is. They've already found it in my trailer. They're already doing what needs to be done. And, that went both directions for everyone.
So where I remember you most was spotting for Rusty and being a spotter. I haven't interviewed any spotters yet. You're the first spotter. So let's go through what the real job of a spotter is. What do you think is, I know that myself, I believe the spotter is, it's 1/3 of the team, being that the vehicle's 1/3, the driver's 1/3, and the spotter's 1/3. But I think the spotter is maybe a little more important than the driver, because you need to know what the capabilities of the vehicle are, but you need to know what the limitations of your driver is.
Right.
Because there's drivers that don't like certain things. They don't like drop-offs. They don't like climbs. They may not like, big side hills, whatever it is, but you got to get them through it. So what did you think of being a spotter? What is it that you feel the spotter's job really is?
Well, and when I stepped in that spotting role, and spotting for Rusty wasn't the first time I spotted. I spotted on and off for some a couple New Rock events for Daryl Motley. Back after the first season with Buddy and the Superman Jeep, we rotated every other event, spotter, driver. But spotting for Rusty, Rusty and I have known each other for a while. We knew each other's personalities, and I think that's a big part of it. I think you're right in that a rock crawling team is made up of those 3 parts: the spotter, the driver, and the car. Probably 1/3 of each. But what behind the scenes, what you don't see is each of those parts has to have the relationship with the other parts. The driver needs to understand the capabilities of the car from his seat. And he also needs to trust that the spotter understands the capabilities of the cars from outside and can see what the car is doing and give him honest feedback on what the car is going to do, what he needs to do, and you have to build that trust. And, there's no way to do that. There's nothing but time. And Rusty and I had some drop-down drag-outs on several occasions, trying to build that level of trust, that relationship, so that we were both working with each other and working with the capabilities of the car. The perfect example, the first event that he and I ever competed with each other was 2007 Hannibal, Missouri. So we show up, and again, that was, Derek West was there, Kenny Bloom was there, Chris May, Drew Goey, those guys were starting to show up. There was a lot of experienced guys, and we missed the top of the podium because Rusty wanted to try to make a bonus line on the main event, or our last event before the finale, or before the shootout. So, and it kicked us back enough because we ended up forfeiting the obstacle because he couldn't finish the obstacle. So it kicked us back enough, and there's no way, even if Kenny, I think Kenny won that event, even if Kenny had rolled or done something silly in the shootout, we couldn't catch him. So that was our first, helmet getting slumped thrown at the car and shouting match like an old married couple. And but we got over it pretty quickly, and we started to understand that we've got to trust each other and things like that. So I think that's probably the more important part. The three parts that you named make up the team, but it's that ability to understand and work with each other and the car and all the different situations you find yourself in on a course.
So when you guys walked a course and laid out your strategy, did you when you walked that course, you came up with a primary idea on how to get through that course, the lines that you wanted to take, where you wanted to back up, a cone that you may want to hit? How many times did that plan come apart after the first or second gate?
Yeah, so the way we always walk, when we came up on the courses, usually the night before or that morning, we would walk every course, right? I mean, I think that's what most teams do. We work every course, but not in super detail. We just walk every course to kind of get an idea of what's going on and understand them. But then you would spend more time on your first and second courses, usually, right? Because you may or may not get to watch someone else run it. The course may not be as cut in, and if there's mud or rocks are going to move around, it's not going to be as laid out. The obvious lines aren't going to be as noticeable as they would later in the day. So normally what we would do is we would walk a course imagining we're going to get the perfect score on the course. No backs, no cones, hit every bonus. That's the way we'd walk the course. And then we'd take a step back and go gate to gate. Okay, so what if we can't make this gate? What if we can't make this gate? What if we can't make this gate? And so that in the back of my mind, that was normally my job to keep up with all that. Because you also know those courses look a lot bigger until you stick a car in the middle of it. You drop a car in the middle of those, and a lot of times you don't realize, oh shit, I didn't think about that big rock, that big boulder there. With the disc being on that side of the car, there was no way we're getting around that. Or, wow, that boulder's 44 inches tall as opposed to 34 inches tall, so my 37-inch tire is not going to get me over it. Or just things like that. And I think that's kind of what you were referring to in your question. But we always try to be prepared for that, gate by gate. And Rusty, I tried to let him drive as much as he wanted to drive, as long as he was listening to me. And a lot of times I'd be doing all the talking. Heck, there were times when he could hear me, but I couldn't hear him. And that was fine, because some of the comms back then were iffy at best. But as long as he could hear me, I knew that he could make the decisions he needed to make based on what I was telling him. And so that's all we would do. We'd book the first set of gates the way we wanted to, make a split-the-second decision. It's like, okay, we're going to stick with plan A, or nope, you're taking that gate, or nope, you're going to turn left up here and back to the second set of gates, or whatever. Once you get that car in the obstacle, you see what it looks like, and you just you work your way through it, manage the time, and get to the end.
How did time play into your courses? Did you feel like 10 minutes wasn't long enough, or did you think that 10 minutes typically was pretty good?
No, I always thought that the 10-minute mark was pretty good because it was long enough that you had time to execute a plan, but it was short enough that it made the day go by fast, and it also kept you on your toes. So really when time became an issue was again, to your point earlier, you get to your second set of gates, and all of a sudden you drop off, and you're bellied out, and then you're sitting, you're stuck. You're not going anywhere. And that happened to us before, At that point, it's rocking and pushing and stacking rocks and forming winch line if you have to, or whatever you've got to do. That's really where the spotter, I think a lot of times you can tell a good spotter from a bad spotter in moments of panic like that. Are they doing what they have to do to get that car unstuck? Or are they throwing their arms up? Are they, how are they responding to that situation? Because in that situation, being inside that car as a driver, he's lost his mind. He's not listening to you. You've got to try to keep him calm, keep him from running you over, and make sure you guys are still on the same page as far as where you're at in the car, what you're doing, why you're doing it. And it may cost you 6 minutes. And then there you are with 4 minutes left to finish the course. And at that point, time becomes an issue, right? And again, I think that's really where that spotter-driver relationship comes in, because your spotter should know, you should have that course memorized. Left to right, driver, hug that cone, front dig at the top, rear burner, back to V-sit, whatever it is, but it should come off very quickly so that the driver is just listening and just reacting and doing what he's got to do, making the car do what the car's made to do at a much faster pace. It's kind of like the OT in a college game or something. You've only got 2 minutes to do this now to get it done, right? So yeah, I always thought the 10 minutes was good. I do it.
Was there a rule that you absolutely hated?
No, I'm not going to say there was a rule that I absolutely hated, but in bridge, as well as I do, one of the biggest things about these events being nationwide, being spread all over the country, you're typically going to end up with a few new volunteers or some people that are a little less experienced. And unfortunately, some of the rules, which I like the rule because, the biggest part, anybody that's rock crawling or has ever done any rock crawling, especially when you're in a competitive group, it's a chess match. I mean, it is such a chess match. Every single back, spotter rope, winch, cone, bonus. You're not looking at that individual cone, or that individual gate. You're looking throughout the day like, okay, I know I'm 4 inches shorter than him, so he's not going to be able to make that climb. So if I can beat him there, I can afford to take this cone here. All these spotters and drivers are thinking that far ahead. But what gets you sometimes is, one of the rules was, and you got us before the one, I'm sure. If you hit the banner, it was a warning as long as you were making progression back into the course, right? Is that how the rule read, something along those lines?
Yeah. Once you got called for a banner warning, you had to get out of the banner, whether you
Correct.
took a backup or you tried to continue going forward, but you had to get away from the banner.
Right.
Are you talking about the Badlands?
Well, that's one instance I can think of. Yeah.
Boy, Rusty hated me that day.
But it's a judgment call, right? That's kind of what I was getting at. Is you had volunteers who are making their best judgment call, and the other thing we don't know as a driver or spotter is have they been making that call the same way every day, or all day? We have to assume they have, right? But in that case, and I don't even remember what year that was. But I think that may have been one of the later in like 2011 or 12 when Rusty had his Ultra 4 car kind of rock crawling. So we're watching, I don't think it was Kenny Bloom, but we'll use him as an example. His Pro Mod car is very small,
Yep.
narrow and relatively short. And there was a big rock there, and he did the same thing we did. He drove up on it. And I say he, I don't remember if it was Kenny or not, but he drove up on it, slid into the banner, got the warning. He had a hard driver, and the car pulled out. Well, then we pull in with 9 or 10 more inches of wheelbase, and we're 5 or 6 inches wider, and we do the same thing. Well, obviously, we don't get out of the banner the way that guy did, and I'm sure that's why we got the call we did. But that's. If I had a complaint, it's just sometimes those judgment calls can be hard to stomach, especially when you're competitive and you're close to the top trying to shoot.
Right. It's always hard pill to swallow, as they say.
Right. All competitors. I can remember down in was it Spring, Texas?
Yep.
The Nationals down there.
Yes.
There was one course where there just wasn't enough room to make this climb, spin the car, 90 degrees, drive across another ledge and drop back down. But for whatever reason, the way that course was laid out, there was only one official or one volunteer judging that portion of the course. So in order to do his job, he had to stay down in the crack. So he was never up on the flat where we had to make a curve. So when Rusty drove up, Rusty's watching me, and I'm walking backwards, motioning for him to keep coming, keep coming. Well, as I'm walking backwards, I'm pushing the banner back with my legs on purpose. The judge can't see that, right? And he gets enough room. I'm saying, okay, hurry, front dig, pasture hard. And he digs around, and I step forward slowly so the banner doesn't do anything crazy where someone would see it, and we go on about our day. Was that the right thing to do? Probably not. But, it's you try to fit it in wherever you can.
Right. So let's see. What is the one event that you remember the most?
I went to Supercrawl 5.
Okay.
That was a man-made course there in the parking lot of the convention center.
Right.
The year before that was 04. We went to Salt Lake City for that Supercrawl. And then 06, I don't think we did anything in 06. Do you remember where the Nationals, where the We Rock Nationals were at in 06?
06, I believe, was either Boyd, Texas, or that may have been, 05 was when we were in Columbus, Ohio, I believe.
Okay. Was that 06 or 05?
Columbus, I'm not sure. 05 or 06.
I want to say that was 06 because I think that was the event I didn't make it to. I couldn't make it to the Nationals. I think that may have been in Columbus that year. I made it prior. One of the other events held at that same location, but I didn't make that one.
Okay.
So yeah, that may have been it. But then fast forward to 07, I believe was Spring, Texas, and then 08 was Hannibal.
I believe so.
So yeah, the Nationals were always cool because you really got to see these competitors that you just hear about, right? All these West Coast teams, the Websters and the Campbells and all those people, even though some of those teams can compete on the East Coast with us as well. But just the number of people, the number of fans, those were always really fun events. But I think really, some of the events that stick out in my mind are more for personal or team achievements, where we kind of pulled off the, Roush Creek, 07 or 08, I don't know what year it was. Rusty won the event. But we literally blew the transmission, rebuilt it in the parking lot that night, put it back in, and pulled onto our first course, our second day, and realized we had no reverse. So we ran the whole second day with no reverse and still won that event. And again, that goes back to walking the course and, okay, well, here's the deal, dude. You can't back up. So you're going down everything. You're going frontwards through all the gates. And we had to lay out our plan that day. And even some of the obstacles we pulled into, people were like, well, what are you doing? Like, we don't have a choice. We can't back into this like everyone else did. This is our only choice to try this. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But we did end up walking away from that win, and that felt pretty good to win that.
Let's talk about the trip into Baja. How did you get all involved with that?
Yeah, so we'll go back to February of 2008. I believe was the second year of the King of the Hammers, if I remember right, second or third year. But anyway, that was a year local, I say local, East Coaster, Doug Bigelow, he went out and raced. He took his moon buggy that he built for rock crawling and he kind of modified it into some XRA stuff and go fast stuff, and he decided to go out and race. Well, I really think him going out to race in 08 was probably a big part of the reason you saw so many East Coast teams in 09 and then 10 and 11 and going on and so forth, because he started it, until 08, until he made that drive out there, that was a West Coast race. That was, Hammers, California. That was just something that we're going to watch on TV, right? Or watch on live streaming or follow on Power 4x4 or whatever. But then he went out there. Not only did he go out there, he finished third, I believe, third or fourth. And everyone was like, I want to do that. That looks like a blast. And even at that time, other than some of the XRA stuff, a lot of us really didn't know much about Go Fast. Will air shocks survive? No, we should probably put coilovers on it. We didn't know what we were doing. So anyway, we decided to try to figure out how we could go to the King of Hammers. Well, that same year, Pirate 4x4 put up a poll, and I don't remember how Rusty got entered into it, but they basically put up a poll saying, hey, Pirate 4x4 is going to pay the entry fee for one driver. And I remember it was Rusty, and I know Chris Ridgway, and someone else were the drivers that year. And Rusty ended up winning it. So that led us to, I believe, actually, the We Rock Nationals in Hannibal, Missouri. Lance was there with, I believe he was spotting for Shannon that weekend, I believe. But he was there, so. And over a few beers at whatever the motor in there was, the big motel. He's like, hey, well, since Pirate 4x4 is, you're going to use their spot at KOH, why don't you come co-drive for me at Baja 1000 this year? And Rusty's like, all right, cool. And he's like, hey, you can come too. I'm like, awesome. So we had zero idea what we were getting ourselves into, So we loaded up the best we knew how and caught a flight to San Diego and jumped in the rental car, and we drove down into Ensenada, found the hotel, and pulled in. And I don't know if you guys remember, but we pulled in. We didn't even go to the room. We pulled in and grabbed our day packs and got right into Lance's truck and went free run. And I didn't have a change of clothes. I didn't have any snacks. I had nothing with me. I don't remember if I had a jacket. So we not only did we go pre-running, that's also the night we went out to the Sky Ranch and stayed there. So we had nothing. But it was just the most amazing experience. Just seeing the things. Even in that first day, I was just awestruck, watching, looking, and feeling, and just, feeling what his truck was going through, for crying out loud. You drove this here, right? Like you towed a trailer with this here, and you're getting it like this. We couldn't understand how you could do that. We're used to the East Coast where, you don't take your tow rig on the trail because usually East Coast trails are trees and mud, and you're gonna get body damage, and desert's a little different. If you've got good suspension, a tow rig will handle it. But so that first day, I can't remember where all we stopped, but I do remember we ended up at the Sky Ranch that night and stayed the night. That was the first night I got to hang out with Pistol Pete, rest in peace. Jesse Combs, she was there with us that night. Lance and you and Little and Rusty, and I can't remember who else was there, but it was just an amazing time. Just literally hanging around a bar, drinking tequila Marys and Captain Morgans and Patron, and not Patron, just shot of some kind of tequila. It was just an amazing time, and getting up and hearing the generator get shut off, before everyone went to bed, and waking up in the morning and it being like 35 degrees and no jackets, and it was just that was a turning point for me in a lot of ways. Not that I still didn't like or don't like today rock crawling, but just the whole go fast desert racing. That's probably when I really caught the bug. My first run-in with the Mexicali, the getting pulled over and having to give stickers that let us go to the checkpoint. And,
yeah, that was
4 guys with wife beaters with AKs around the.
A different world down there for sure. Especially
that's how we ended up here. It's great.
And then the infamous race day.
Oh yeah.
And we had we were supposed to stick around to the beginning of the race. Then we were supposed to head north on 2 toward Tecate, and then over down that big grade and catch the team over there. Yeah, he tried to kill us a couple of times, I think.
Yeah. And let's not forget, not to even come back to that for sure, but before we get that far, don't forget that the night before we were putting a new transmission in that Jeep.
That's right.
Yep. They'd blown the transmission, so we spent all day at the transmission shop getting a new transmission put in the race Jeep to get it ready to go the following morning.
Yeah, and in an open air transmission shop.
The first thing I remember about that trip, as far as you and I, is you were in town for some reason. We had the Jeep at the hotel. You were in town for some reason. And Lance called and said, hey, just, pick us up some supper. And you brought back like 64 tacos or something from the taco stand. And we all just destroyed tacos the night before the race, which was probably not the best idea. But it kept us warm the next day.
Those were El Pastor tacos, though.
But yeah, that's what's that?
I think those were the El Pastor tacos.
Yeah, they were. Yep. Yep, they were fantastic. I remember, of course, I didn't know where we were at. You were kind of the lead of the truck and my first time being down there. But, I do remember we left fairly early that morning and headed out. And we had wherever we were pitting at our first pit, we sat there forever. So we got there early enough to see. I don't remember if we saw the leaders on the dirt bikes come through, but I know we saw the quads. And that year, some of the car guys from the side cars were there. I remember seeing those guys come through, and then, we watched the trophy trucks come through and the Class 1s come through. And it was just the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life at that point. And up till then, our trip had been pretty calm. We took our time getting there, didn't have any trouble getting there. And, had all the time in the world to set up our pit. And, finally, Mike Schaefer was driving at the time. He gets there and he pulls in, and I think they were pretty solid. I think we checked the steering, threw some gas in it, but nothing major was wrong with the car at that time. And then he took off, and we're like, go, go, go. And that's when I'm like, whoa, okay, now the race is on. And after that is, back to your point, is when we almost died a few times.
Yeah. I remember the first thing that morning was we're pulling out of town, and it was yourself, myself, Josh England in the truck. And we were, and it was a pretty new truck, and it had that really expensive, I think Carly or somebody.
It was Core.
Core, okay, yep, the Core suspension and that mega cab. Yeah. And we were in that construction zone just at the edge of town, the base of the mountain. And I'm looking over, and there's a, we're all in this line, and there's a coned area off to the side, but it's like a couple of foot drop down to the coned area. And I was just itching to go. And I remember, I think I said, should I take it? And we all looked at it. And it may have been England. I'm going to blame England. He said, yeah, go for it. So we launched off of that. And then I look back before we get to the end of the construction area. It's like a ramp up to where the road is, but we were behind school buses. And so we passed all them, and I looked back in the mirror, and it was like a jailbreak. Every other chase team was like, yeah, let's do this. And they all jumped into that construction area. We all drove through the construction zone. And then up and over that hill, and then going on the downhill side when I tried to make that pass on all those big semi-trucks.
That's one that I remember, because even before you tried to make that pass, we're driving along. They've been dark for some time there. And you're just seeing, chase trucks everywhere, running as fast as they can, going hard. And the road, I don't remember what road that was, but the road is elevated a little bit from the field on each side.
Yes.
And you would drive along about every 2 or 3 miles, you look over and there just see this random car, like a lawn darted, with its nose stuck in the mud and steel. And it was from these chase trucks pulling out and running these cars off the road. They're shooting off and Dukes of Hazzard off into these fields and just lawn darting, because I guess maybe it rained, the field was wet, I don't know. But there's all these cars just lawn darted and stuck everywhere in these fields. And that's about the time that, all right, it looks clear. And no sooner than he pulled out, you could see the semi just barreling down on us. It was like that scene from Christmas Vacation where he's stuck under the semi and pops out. And you had a split decision. It was either go or don't go. And you win. And I would say, what was our safety net there, Rich? A second and a half, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah. It was I think we were all awake. There was no Red Bulls drinking, or no Monster was drinking, or no 5-hour energies for some time there, because none of us needed it. We were all.
I think we tapped our adrenaline real heavy. And luckily, those two trucks, the one coming at us and the last one we needed to pass, slowed down at the last minute so that I could get back in there. Because down that hill, they all started accelerating instead of, on their jakes, which I figured, they'd be on the jake brakes like most of the time there. And I swear to God, they saw I was coming and just trying to race me to that opening. But luckily at the end there, we didn't wreck. We didn't kill anybody, although you could call it close.
It's also should mention that was the trip that Josh England and myself got deemed Big Josh and Little Josh.
Yep.
So that people knew who was talking on the radio.
That's right.
Another good memory of that trip though, and it was later on in the night. We'd actually gotten ahead of. It must have been one of the pits we'd leapfrogged. Was DSI down there? Was Dave Snyder down there? I think he was.
Who?
Dave Snyder.
He may have been. Yes, I think he was part of that effort.
I think he was. So I think we were leapfrogging with him a few times. Anyway, we got to wherever we needed to go next, and we're able to pull right up next to the race course. And we're just sitting there. I mean, we're probably sitting there for 30 minutes, just waiting, listening to the chat on the radio. They were having issues with that cam sensor, I believe, or crank sensor. They're having issues with the crank sensor. We were going to try to take a look at it. So we're just waiting on them to come through. It's me and you and Josh, and I think Little had joined us by that point. I think that was after Pistol had broken down, and I think he jumped in with us and chased the rest of the race with us. So I think it was 4 of us in the truck. So we're sitting there, we're waiting, and just chit-chatting and talking, and all of a sudden, we hear over the radio, all right, 2 miles out or whatever, and we start seeing headlights, and so we all open our doors and step out of the truck at the same time. And I'm thinking I don't remember where I was sitting, but I know I turned to reach in the back of the bed to get something, and I watched the tailgate go past me.
I was trying to jump back in the car, the truck. I left it in gear.
You've been in there for 30 minutes with the truck in drive, and then you pile out, between the 4 guys. I mean, between you and Big Josh and me and Little Rich, that's enough weight that it must have let up enough pressure off those tires. The truck just was rolling casually out in the middle of the race course. No big deal.
I don't think we told Lance about that one.
No, he'll probably hear it now, though. I just remember I was finally able to jump back in the passenger side and dive across. And when I dived across, I killed the GPS and turned the radio off, unplugged that whole center console we had in that truck, and I finally got my hands on the brake, and you were able to get in and put it in park, and then we had to back it back out of the course before the cars came. Oh, man.
I do remember that. I had forgotten that, though. Oh, man. That's what happens when you spend too many hours without any sleep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was for sure a long day.
Yep.
But again, that was still before our first KOH. That's why, going forward, we went to KOH that year, or the following February, 09. And then I ended up getting somewhat of a job change. Well, 09 was, again, Rusty sold that car, actually, with Rest KOH, and then we competed in. He sold it at SEMA that year. That's when I ended up starting to co-drive for Mike Fagan's Scooby, better known as Scooby.
Yep.
And that's who I've been with ever since. So there was a time in there when the Trek series was kicking off, and I actually did one dirt ride with it, but I built, because of that trip and because of that Jeep speed, I built a Cherokee that I was racing locally and had an absolute blast with it. It's still, to this day, I'm dying to build another Cherokee. I guess, I don't know. They're just amazing. The tin cans that just won't die.
So let's talk about your life now. You're married. You got some kids. Are you you still off-roading? What's going on?
Yeah. So these days, I got married in 2014. We had our first daughter in 2016. We just had her 4-year birthday party. And then we had our second daughter in 2017. So they're they're 13 months apart. So a little sooner than we were expecting to have number two, but sometimes you take what you get, and we are super happy. But with that, my current focus is more towards family right now. With a 2 and 3, now 3 and 4-year-old, that takes a lot of time. My career has changed since back when I first started. I've tried to continue to work up. I'm now in a level of program management, managing several sustainment programs as a DoD contractor, so working for Special Operations Forces. So obviously, even during this time of COVID, I remained essential. My wife, she works for the Department of Justice, so she remained essential. We were struggling, rotating schedules, night shifts, day shifts, trying to find anyone we could to watch the kids because daycares were shut down. So I think all that just put a new light on things for us, and my focus is probably going to remain on that, taking somewhat of a sabbatical from the off-road racing. Not that I won't go or don't go. This year was the first year I've missed King of Hammers since 2009, with the exception of I did spend a year in Afghanistan in 2010, 2011. I missed that year. But other than that, this is the first year that I've missed by choice. So it was I'm not going to say a tough call. I knew it was a call I needed to make, but sitting at home, I'm thankful for the coverage, the live coverage they were able to provide, because it was very tough being here and not getting another case of hammer on, out on the lake there. So.
Yeah, you couldn't beat the live coverage this year either. It was
amazing.
It was amazing coverage. It was amazing race. The number of lead changes in that race was just incredible. You didn't know who was actually going to pull that thing off until Byler did. And
I think my heart probably skipped just like everyone else's when we thought we may actually have our first queen of the hammer.
Yes. I was telling Bailey ahead of time that, she was my favorite going into the race.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing what a little pulley will do.
Oh, isn't that crazy? Yeah, it's never the $10,000 part. It's
right.
Always the $30 or $40 or $50 or $100 part, right?
That's it. Yep. Well,
yeah. So other than that, I'm officially out of the Jeep business right now for the first time in my life since that first Jeep. I've got a Razor. I've got a Polaris Razor right now that I beat around in. My father, he'll be 71 this year, so he's really gotten into riding his Razor, and the girls are getting a little older, and so that's something I can do with him. Father-son time, and something that I can do with the girls. We do with the family. So I've kind of focused on that, at least for the near future, until, I'm definitely not done racing in one form or fashion. Even if it's, I wouldn't mind getting back in put the old spotting gear back on, going out and spotting for somebody. But if you know anybody looking, I can send them a resume.
If you're really interested in spotting, I'm always getting people asking, if I know anybody that can spot. So, there's.
Let me know for sure, especially to the East Coast race, and my schedule's open. That's something I could probably pull off, just a weekend getaway. And
okay, cool.
I'm in a situation right now with the family and work that it's tough to put in for that whole year.
Oh, yeah.
Sign up for a full season right
now. No, that makes sense. And family is always first.
Yeah.
And, the part of that family thing is making sure that you stay employed as well.
That's right. Absolutely.
Bringing home the money to
right.
take care of the family. Absolutely. So is there anything that you want to touch on that we haven't touched on? Any story or any time period or anything?
The only thing we haven't touched on, and it's outside of, well, not really, because you were there for some of it too. I do want to touch on the Team Indiana guys, Scooby, Mike Fagan.
Oh, absolutely.
Jonathan Terhune, Chris May.
Stan and.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, all the Brandon guys, back when Roscoe was still with us, his team. Everyone that comes out there to help those guys, to come out there as a team from the East Coast and be competitive and have the parties and have the camaraderie and who else on the lake that has a 30-foot purple dragon? It's a good group of guys, and hoping that some of them listen to this because, most of them didn't meet me until that 2009, 2010, 2011 time frame or later. And so I don't think they realize that, I've been doing this since I was 19. I put my first helmet on as a competitive off-road racer in 2003. And maybe it'll be good for them to hear some of the story and where I came from and things like that. And, just to give a shout out to all those guys, it's just such a great family. And that extends across the Ultra 4 family. And, I think we're all just happy to be involved with everyone to some level. So,
yes. Awesome.
So if you start talking those stories, we could go down a rabbit hole with those guys.
Well, maybe Wyatt will get to it.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. And Wyatt's been involved in some of that too. So.
Yes. Well, Mike, thank you for taking the time. You're on the East Coast. We started this about 9 o'clock, and it's after 10 now for you. The sun has just gone down completely here on the West Coast because I'm sitting just outside of, in Placerville, California. Okay. But I want to say thank you for coming on board, sharing your life and off-road and telling the stories that you've told. And thank you for being in a lot of my memories. The trip to Baja is a classic. We could sit and talk on that one forever. There's some of those things that we just got to, it's probably better that we might forget. But
yeah, at least not make public knowledge, right?
Yeah, what happens in Baja stays in Baja. We'll just leave it at that.
Right.
Anyway, thank you for coming on board with Conversations with Big Rich, and I hope to see you out rock crawling for an event or two next year. I'll let the guys know that you might be available to spot once in a while.
Yes, sir. Let me know. I'd love to. Nothing else. Have a beer with you guys at some point. So.
There you go. All right. You take care and thank you.
Thanks. See you.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.